Let's move forward now. So depending on the time of the day, the light on my face is different. So maybe you should just see how nice the view is here. So it's not the lake, but you can see that it's the garden that I see. Lots of bird sounds. I don't know if some of them come through in the podcasts, but either way, let me continue with the podcast. So we are now looking at designing capacity development for resilience. We are in the third part about changing the world. While the importance of capacity for resilience is widely recognized as a requisite for sustainable development, it's less clear how to assess, develop, evaluate, and sustain it. Sustaining these efforts is always very critical because we must stay on this path to sustainable development no matter how many detours there are. That's the quintessential resilience in this book, according to this author, and I tend to agree with it. However, most of the challenges for capacity development are not unique to the context of resilience, but have been baffling development professionals for almost half a century. In 1969, the US Agency for International Development commissioned a study that found a number of common challenges, i.e. vague planning, unclear responsibilities, and difficult evaluation, which sadly enough still echo in many evaluations of project and programs today. This sparked the development of the logical framework approach, which has been adopted and adapted by numerous organizations and spread all over the world. So you can look at the examples from these references here. Although the logical framework approach has received criticism over the years and changed names every now and then, so it can be called goal-oriented project planning, results-based management, and so on. It is still a pragmatic methodology for the design, monitoring, and evaluation of capacity development projects and programs. So you must stay on track to build capacity, especially for the global south, but turns out even for the global north, because the climate impacts are becoming very widespread and the global north is not as well prepared as it thinks it is, or as immune to climate impacts as they used to think. The purpose of this subsection is to present a framework for the design of capacity development initiatives which builds on the strengths of Ortengren's version of the logical framework approach while tailoring it to suit the specific context of resilience. However, it's important to note that the logical framework approach must be kept flexible as different situations may require adaptations in the methodology to meet the needs of the actors involved in each context. We have discussed this slightly differently in the course in the part on sustaining the commons. That said, I intend to use this opportunity to provide contextualized guidance for how teams of internal and external partners, here referred to as project teams, together can reach the intention of each step of the logical framework approach when seeking to address issues of risk and resilience for sustainable development. So you have to address risk and build resilience. The detours of risk must be considered to bring you back to the pathway to sustainable development. The rationale of the logical framework approach for capacity development entails a current situation that contains challenges that are considered undesirable but possible to address through purposeful activities. In other words, there is a current situation that can be turned into a preferred situation through the design and implementation of a capacity development project or program. I've written about this idea of how to make every challenge into an opportunity. This is related to that kind of a thought process. We keep saying climate crisis is here, and yet you will not find a single climate scientist whose life is appearing like there is a crisis. They live a normal life, worry about normal things: children, retirement, education, vacation, home buying, etc., etc. I'm not saying it's bad, it's just that we have coined this term climate crisis and use it to keep on emphasizing the bad impacts, but there is very little emphasis on what to do about the risk, and there is very little ability right now to produce risk information at the scales needed and the solutions to decarbonize the system in terms of food, water, energy, transportation, health, buildings, and so on, right? So keeping that in mind, also here we are looking at what the current situation is and jumping up and down, and IPCC keeps providing projections out to 2100 without having the level of information needed to actually make decisions even for the next decade. But we can then build projects and so on to head towards preferred situation, so that current situation is a challenge, but you use it to see where you want to head, right? So the rationale for logical framework approach is to always create preferred situations out of current situations. Okay, the logical framework approach for designing capacity development initiatives consists of 9 steps, 3 focused on the current situation, 1 focused on the desired situation, and 5 focused on the project or program itself, which we will see in a minute. However, these 9 steps are not sequential in the sense of starting from the top and ticking them off one by one, but connected to each other in such a way that it is often required to go back and forth between them to revise the whole thing throughout the process. For example, new information may surface while analyzing assumptions, which is important for the situation analysis. Below follows short descriptions of each of the 9 steps, including key questions that each step is intended to answer, as well as suggestions for how to answer them in practice. So we are here focusing very much on capacity, designing capacity development for resilience. So we'll come back and look at that in this context, but we have discussed the idea of having flexible strategies and plans and implementations in the context of adaptation, where the adaptation and maladaptation are unfortunately like a continuum, and if you are not careful about how flexible you are, you might just slide into maladaptation from a well-intended adaptation based on current situation, current risks, and so on, and the uncertainty of the risks that keep popping up with climate change that is continuing, relentlessly. So we have to keep similar flexible framework in mind here in the logical framework approach. So we will come back and do that in the next podcast, because I want to focus more on this rather than rushing it into this podcast. But you can see these 9 steps, with 3 on the current situation, 1 on the preferred situation you want to create, and the third one, the 5 are focused on developing the projects and programs to actually build capacity development for resilience into the preferred situation. So you always want to have your eye on where you want to be and not get bogged down into a fight or flight situation, or a flight or freeze situation with all the alarmist messages about climate change. We must focus always on how to keep ahead of the problems we have created and will continue to create, because we are still completely embedded in a carbon trap, fossil fuel based system. Every infrastructure we have, everything we do produces carbon footprint. So as we continue to decarbonize the system, adaptation should happen, mitigation should happen, and building resilience should happen as well. Okay, so we'll come back and continue that after couple of days, maybe, because I'll be away for a couple of days. So let me find, this is only 9 minutes, but that's okay. It sets up a nice context for how we design capacity development for resilience. Okay, so let's come back and meet in the next podcast in a couple of days.